Ibrahim?
Thank you very much, distinguished colleagues and friends. It's a great pleasure to meet you all in this event, which is, just to situate it, it's the fourth of a series of 6 events that are organized under the umbrella of a pledge for action by religious actors in response to the Secretary General appeal last year. And it's organized, as you all know, in collaboration with OSCE and the Office of the Alliance of Civilizations. So being the fourth, we are improving every step of the road, and I would submit to all of you that the 2 main distinctions that we try to achieve together is that these events are not only talking about things, but trying to identify learning points that we can all run with it. The second feature is that we try to have as least distinction as possible between panelists and participants, so that it's really a peer-to-peer and collective brainstorming together. That's why we will try to dedicate only half an hour for the panelists and the full hour after that for the exchanges. So panelists can also keep some of their munitions and ideas for that exchange that Michael and I will be having the pleasure to moderate. I would like to say that we will start with a short video of 3-4 minutes by the High Commissioner that she addressed to another meeting last December, of the ACT Alliance, because she touched upon issues related to religious minorities. So with your permission, we will start with this short video.
And faith-based organizations are one of the non-state actors who are nearest to the people. They are particularly close to the most needy and vulnerable. And the current crisis is one of public health that requires awareness, compassion, and solidarity. And faith actors are uniquely well placed to promote those values that are more needed than ever. And I think such actions are particularly compelling if various faith actors join their hands and hearts in an interfaith manner. Let me give you a recent example, I think, of such interfaith support. I found it incredible. A Lutheran church in Berlin has hosted Muslim worshippers who were unable to take part in Friday prayers at their mosque because of social distancing rules. So the imam led prayers in German and Arabic, stressing that the pandemic has brought people together. The church pastor was moved by the Muslim call to prayer in the church, and she said, because it was a she, it's a her, that we have the same concerns and we want to learn from you. And it's beautiful to feel that way about each other. And I would like to emphasize the powerful image of a male imam and a female pastor praying together and acting in solidarity. And also, I think that is very important to fight against, hate speech, anti-different religions, and anti-migrants, and xenophobia. So we discussed this and other examples of mutual cooperation in the COVID-19 context last month during the workshop in Lindau at the first Assembly of Women, Faith and Diplomacy, which Religions for Peace organized extremely well. So all my congratulations, Professor Karam, and probably she's gonna talk about that much more. And I think it truly served as peer-to-peer learning on gender equality, human rights, and the responsibility of faith actors, with each participant sharing their own experiences and bringing in additional perspective and stories. My office has also associated our effort with the Alliance of Civilizations and the Special Advisor on Prevention of Genocide in order to engage with faith actors through a series of webinars on 6 topics where the role of faith actors is particularly influential. Aligning the efforts of these 3 UN entities in partnership with faith-based actors is particularly important on a specific peer-to-peer learning program. I think it's a major shift from the traditional top-down approaches to a genuine recognition of what faith actors have to offer and what the UN can learn from their action and wisdom. And also, I think it's not just another dialogue. It is based on a specific list of actions by religious actors and faith-based organizations to address the COVID-19 pandemic in collaboration with the United Nations that our respective offices extracted from a global consultation with faith-based actors since last May. I want to use this opportunity to invite all participants to register for the forthcoming series of webinars by the UN Alliance of Civilization, the Office of Genocide Prevention, and my office, with religious actors and faith-based organizations. It will start next Monday with a webinar on gender equality and the role of faith actors in achieving it. But you will find the list of the subsequent monthly webinars on the Faithful Rights website of our office. And I think the methodology will be very interactive by sharing good practices and lessons learned concerning gender equality, hate speech, religious sites, minorities, atrocity crimes, and interfaith dialogue. And finally, what else can, I mean, I had an experience in my country because I work a lot with interfaith actors as a president. And also, even when I was working on a new constitution, they get together and they propose also, they give a lot of proposals to this new constitution. And they even discuss, and they told me, laughing, that they even discuss about gender equality, like a topic that they never discussed before, but it was a fantastic opportunity. And secondly, I think we have now on this crisis a good opportunity for change. And that is what we have been saying, we need to build back better. We cannot go back to the day zero because that world, it was not an equal world, it was not a just world for the majority of the people. So we need to think what means build back better. And I think faith actors should also provide their perspective, their points of view. I think we need an inclusive economy and we need a greener world and we need to respect nature and so on. But I think it will be very important if faith actors also contribute to this discussion. Thank you.
So can you hear me now? Good. So that was obviously a message that the High Commissioner gave already last December, but I think it's very much pertinent and introduces also today's discussion very nicely. And I think also the example that she gave as a storytelling, real life example from the pastor in Berlin who offered her church to a religious minority, a Muslim community who couldn't gather for COVID-19 reasons. I think it's a very powerful example, and that's also precisely the idea of this peer-to-peer learning exchange that we are having on a monthly basis. And here I wanted also to bring in the Special Rapporteur on Minority Issues, Dr. Fernand de Varennes, who also in his most recent report to the General Assembly has highlighted really the importance of religious or belief minorities, and perhaps also to underline the importance of the or belief side, which oftentimes gets neglected. So obviously all the atheists, agnostics, humanists are equally protected under Article 18 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And also, Fernand, your most recent report that you just presented to the Human Rights Council earlier this month is focusing on hate speech and minorities and social media. So perhaps if you would like to reflect on the specific challenges that religious or belief minorities are facing, especially in the COVID-19 context. Thank you.
Merci, Michael. Yes, I will. Hello, everyone. Shalom. Namaste. Assalamu alaikum. Bonjour, tout le monde. First of all, my thanks and appreciation to the UN Alliance of Civilizations, the Office of the Special Advisor on the Prevention of Genocide, and the OIGHR for this timely event in the context of the implementation of the Global Pledge for Action, and for the honor, of course, of participating today. So let me get straight to the point. Some religious or belief groups, specifically minorities, in my opinion, need to be prioritized for protection because they're increasingly experiencing three particular types of vulnerabilities during this pandemic. And these vulnerabilities are in terms of accessibility, of faith-based hurdles, and of scapegoating and hate speech and even violence, once again, focusing on religious or belief groups. The first issue relates to the accessibility, in that some members of religious or belief minorities may not be effectively reached by or in state awareness campaigns, or they may face barriers in accessing vaccines or public health measures and campaigns. And what occurs is that certain religious or belief minorities may, for example, use among themselves a language which differs from that of the majority of the country, or they rely on information that are shared among themselves through their community or religious or belief leadership. Or there may be barriers because, well, vaccination centers are maybe far removed from them or not very accessible for some of these religious or belief minorities. And another barrier is that public health campaigns to prevent the spread of the virus or vaccination campaigns are not culturally sensitive, or they are not targeting significant religious or belief communities sufficiently, or once again, they're not conducted in the languages that is most appropriate and effective to truly reach out and communicate effectively in this, what is essentially a life-saving message. The second vulnerability is the need to accurately identify and address particular faith-based hurdles. There have been, as many of you are aware, there have been, for example, some Jewish, Islamic, or Hindu concerns expressed over the acceptability of vaccines because of their rumored content, including pork gelatin, for example, or using quote unquote cow blood or bovine products. State authorities in some of these countries, therefore, need to be more aware, need to take into account and offer targeted reassurances to address these faith-based concerns. And thirdly, and unfortunately, there are particular religious or belief minorities that have been specifically targeted, scapegoated, and accused as spreaders of the COVID-19 virus. Once again, particularly in social and other media. And this has included hate speech and even incitement to violence against them. And the scale and the severity of hate speech against minorities in general is dramatic, as I indicate in my report, with 3/4 or more of hate speech targeting minorities, as far as we can tell, in a large number of countries, if not most countries around the world. And as I've frequently warned in the last year, and I've raised directly a few weeks ago in my thematic report to the UN Human Rights Council, what we're seeing is the exploitation of COVID-related fears by retail systems to scapegoat and or belief. Sometimes through, as you know, conspiracy theories. Now, I must emphasize this point. This has led to an alarming rise in verbal and physical abuses against religious or religious or belief minorities. For example, Yazidis and Kakais in Iraq, Christians, Hazara, Shias, and Hindus in Pakistan. You have Cambodia's Khmer Muslim minorities also, who have been targeted and scapegoated in this way. As I and colleagues, including Ahmed, Shaheed, the Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion or Belief, warned a few weeks ago, some time ago, in response to the government of Sri Lanka imposing cremation ostensibly as a health precaution measure against the will of religious or belief minorities in that country. And I'll just very briefly quote what we said in this release. Hostility against minorities could exacerbate existing prejudices, intercommunal tensions, and religious intolerance while inciting further hatred and violence. The COVID-19 pandemic is not just a health issue. Social media has made it also a disease of the mind, propagating as a virus that exacerbates xenophobia, hate, and exclusion, what the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres termed a tsunami of hate and xenophobia, and the World Health Organization has called as an infodemic of harmful disinformation and public hate speech. So I'll conclude even though it's a bit pessimistic, I'll conclude that we're facing a crisis caused by the spread of COVID that is both exacerbating but also echoing historical and structural patterns of bigotry and discrimination against mainly religious or belief minorities on a global scale. And what is called for is a global response. As I suggested in my report a few weeks ago, an international regulatory framework, bringing the best examples to try to actually protect those most in need because of their vulnerability, religious or belief minorities. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you very much, Fernand. As you depicted very well, crises extract from us the best, but at times the worst as well. And your voice, as well as Ahmed Shaheed, on this particular topic of protecting religious and belief minorities is is a source of hope. I would like now to move to try to see, because your voice and your convening power as special procedure system can only have impact as it relates and conveys grassroots actors. And in this context, I'm very pleased to give the floor to Nina Noor, who is an advocate and a lecturer, and who has seen it from both the side of the Office of the High Commissioner as a fellow for the Minorities program, and also on the ground. So Noor, to you. Nina, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ibrahim. It's an honor to me to join this webinar on protecting religious or belief minorities in the context of COVID-19. And then let me introduce myself first. My name is Nina Mariani Noor. I'm an Ahmadi from Indonesia. So Ahmadiyah in Indonesia is a minority group, Muslim minority group within Muslim majority in Indonesia. As we know that Indonesia is the biggest Muslim country in the world, so there are 230 million Muslim majority, and most of them are Sunni. And among those Muslims, there are Ahmadi numbered in 500,000, and there are also Shia as minority group. In Indonesia, Ahmadiyah is we kind of like face some discrimination and difficulties because of our religious belief that seen as different from the majority, the Muslim majority. So since after the Reformasi era in 1998, we face like a attack on our mosque, and then we also find it difficult to get our electronic ID card as a citizen of Indonesia, and some of our people couldn't register their marriage till 2018, but now they can do it officially. Okay, and then related to the way how we fight for our rights in dealing with this kind of discrimination that we face both from the government, mostly from the local government, and also from other groups, other Muslim groups. So we do like legal way to for judicial review on blasphemy law. So in Indonesia, there is like a law, PNPS 1965, that about blasphemy law, and from this law, Ahmadiyah seen as doing blasphemy to the Islam. And then the other way to we do like networking. So we build relationship with the majority Muslim. So in Indonesia, the biggest number of Muslim organizations are Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah. And we as a minority, we try to have a good relationship with them. So it helps much for us to get our rights. So if there are some violence on our rights, so some people from those two organizations would help us. And another way we do we are active in interfaith dialogue, because we after years of discrimination and attacks, we realized that people didn't know exactly what Ahmadiyya is. So that's why they have their own prejudice, and they see us as different. So they see that they have the right to attack us. And related to the pandemic COVID-19, actually this pandemic, every people are affected in Indonesia, regardless they are majority or minority. So, and of course the most vulnerable are particularly women and children. And in this COVID-19, the government suggests us to like health protocol. So it means that we have to limit our religious activities that involve many people, such as doing Jumat prayer. So till now, we Ahmadiyya community haven't held Jumat prayer in our mosque. So our mosque still closed for us, but it's because of the COVID-19. But in some area, there is like in green area, the COVID is not quite big number, so they can still do their religious activities. And because of this, And it happens to all communities, actually, to all religious community, both Muslim majority, Muslim minority, and then also for Christian, Hindu. So they have to limit their religious activities that involve many people. And then we as a community, we move our religious activities in online platform. So in one side, it is good for us because we can coverage all Ahmadi from all around Indonesia. But on another side, it means that we have limitation to interact with other people, and of course, it will bring about other effect on that. And this in this opportunity, I want to share what our community do in this pandemic COVID-19. We don't really face discrimination in this COVID-19 because everybody got their own issues. So people who usually will attack us, they know dealing with their own problems. So that's why in this we have more opportunities to do community service. So as a small community, we like to give, for example, because in Indonesia the pandemic started in March 2020. So that start some people got infected by the virus. So our organization, Jemaat Ahmadiyah Indonesia in national level, suggests all the to do what they can do for other people inside for our own community. So for example, we do donation, giving masks for people, hand sanitizer, disinfectant, and also we open fundraising within our own community and we distribute it to other community. Till now, we do fundraising monthly because in Ahmadiyya we have like a system that every month we will like give money to our organization, and we do through that we do fundraising. And till now it's about 157 million rupiah that can be distributed to help other people. So to conclude for my sharing, so this pandemic COVID-19 actually give us more opportunity to be accepted as part of Indonesian citizen through our social humanity service. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nina, for sharing this experience also from the intra-religious perspective, which I personally found fascinating to hear. And also with your positive note that despite all the legal constraints, for example, of the anti-blasphemy law in Indonesia, that the current context has even also alleviated some of your problems. So I found that interesting. Perhaps we can now turn over to Rabbi Marcelo Polakoff. He's the Commissioner for Interfaith Dialogue of the Latin American Jewish Congress. Something, if you Google his name, you will inevitably also come to a wonderful song that Rabbi Marcelo Polakoff produced 4 years ago together with Bishop Monsignor Pedro Torres in Argentina. And it's a lovely musical dialogue called Hanukkah Carol, basically bringing together the different religious traditions. So perhaps you could share with us how interfaith communication works in practice, especially now in the COVID-19 context. Over to you, Rabbi.
Thank you very much. Sounds okay? Are you listening to me? Okay, great. So thanks again for the invitation of this meeting. Well, Chag Sameach to the Jews that are here because we are in Passover, in Pesach. Let me also say Happy Easter for our Christian friends, and also with the 2 weeks from now, Ramadan Mubarak to our Muslim brothers. So after that, I wanna pose 4 subjects in 7 minutes, which is a kind of marathon. The first one is a conceptual one, and the second, third, and fourth will be some experiences on interfaith dialogue in this context of the COVID. The first conceptual point that I want to stress, it was reminded by my friend and boss, Claudio Eppelman, 2 weeks ago when we talked about this webinar. And he reminded me of a paragraph, the 131, if you want to look for it, of the encyclical Fratelli Tutti, which was done by our friend, the Father Jorge, or the Pope Francis. And it says literally in this paragraph of Fratelli Tutti, it is important to apply the concept of citizenship, which is based on the equality of rights and duties, the concept of full citizenship, and to reject the discriminatory use of the term minorities, which engenders feeling of isolation and inferiority. Its misuse paves the way for hostility and discord. It undoes any successes and takes away the religious and civil rights of some citizens who are thus discriminated against. This point is very important to my ears, because we must make a way from the concept of minorities and majorities to this concept of citizenship. And I can stress that we could be very nice and delightful Jewish, Muslim, Christian citizens in our countries, and that is better to be called a minority or a majority, because this kind of inferiority and the power of the majorities is a very strange problem that sometimes, as the Pope said, leads to hostility or aggressions. In this way, I want you to know a little story that happened here a couple of years ago in Cordoba, which is the second largest city of Argentina. There was a national gather of women organization, very huge, maybe 4,000 women, representative women gathered in the city, and they did really nice things, conference, workshops, social actions. But in the last demonstration, they were marching through the main avenues of the city, and some ladies of a very small group over a church, and they made a lot of offensive graffitis in the church, accusing the Christian church of doing bad things with the subject of abortion and all that stuff. Where the walls were really with a lot of phrases that I don't want to share with you because of the embarrassing subject. And I remember calling the Archbishop of the province and telling him, "What are you going to do with this?" And he said, "Of course, we're going to paint that. We're going to whiten the walls." And we suggested him not to do that. That we, Jewish, Muslims, and all other Jewish religion, faith, that we should do that. And actually, we took a lot of youngsters, and together with the religious leaders, we ourselves grabbed, the painting and whitened the walls of the city. This had a big media coverage. This is the important thing, that you have the right of freedom, but you don't have the right. You have the right of freedom of speech, but you don't have the right of freedom of aggression. And when one is, damaged, we should all together, take this point and send a message to the whole society in order that they will understand that an aggression is an aggression, and it doesn't matter if you are a majority, a minority, or whatever. This is the second point. The third point is regarding to the Kovid crisis. The national government conformed an emergency committee, and we were called to look especially for the disposal of dead bodies, because of all the subjects related to the cremation that are dealt in a different ways in the different religions. So all the efforts were done, and this was confirmed by the reality that when a Jew or a Muslim, for example, have died from COVID, they were not going to be cremated because we don't allow this practice. And the respect that the government took this point is a very nice way of calling this the full citizenship if we as minorities, religious minorities, are good citizens in our Jewish, Muslim, Christian ways, we will be given the rights to, to practice our own religious ways in our own religious way. And the last thing up to now is that this distancing way of living couldn't, the opposite. This could lead to other things and other ways of engaging together. And we from the Jewish Latin American Congress organized something very nice in the last year with Muslims, celebrating with them together, imams and rabbis, through Zoom. We celebrated the Eid al-Adha and Eid al-Fitr, the main Muslim festivities, and we were celebrating together with them. And a couple of weeks ago, we did it the same with the Christians, with more than 40 bishops of Latin America. We organized together a way of celebrating Pascuas and Passover and dealing with this. It's a way of strengthening the relationship and our citizenship and our religious minorities or majorities. We should go on in these ways. That's for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Marcelo, for this inspiring example of collective action by religious leaders, and the fact that they didn't leave it to the church itself to repair the damage, but they acted collectively. And I think this is an important lesson that all along history, there are so many unknown stories, and maybe Michael will soon share in the chat box to save time, the story of the son of Christoph Heinz, whom we lost unfortunately 2 days ago. He is a filmmaker, and how he did a film on his grandfather Johan as a religious leader who dared to defy apartheid in South Africa at the time where this was the norm. So this is very important and inspiring. Your conceptual point, I'm sure that that Fernand in the discussion will probably have something to say about it. It was also in the same fraternity statement between the Pope and the Imam of Al-Azhar in Abu Dhabi in February 2019, the same notion that you reflected. The notion of the collective action as a duty of religious actors brings me to the next speaker, Anna Daou. Anna is working with Adyan, and she's also representing the Youth and Religions for Peace, Adyan Foundation that we all know and we collaborated with. So she has a double viewpoint of a researcher, a practitioner, and a young person also. So we look forward to hear your perspectives, Anna.
Thank you, Dr. Salama, and thank you everyone for having me here. It's a pleasure to be among such amazing people with such an extensive experience. I long part of my intervention was actually covered by Rabbi Marcelo because I wanted to refer to what the Human Fraternity document said and was reiterated in Fratelli Tutti about the definition of protecting minorities and whether we are protecting the concept or the people or the values. And based on this understanding of protecting minorities and the role we play at Adyan, whether with youth or in education or in research, I want to focus more on the protection of the values of inclusion and social cohesion and diversity through 3 pillars. And this is why I'm using the acronym of IRD, which is usually used for interrelated dialogue, to focus on other 3 pillars, which are inclusion, resilience, and diversity. So first, I want to start with the idea of inclusion by asking the question of what are minorities or who should be included in these efforts or whom should we focus on. And I want to particularly focus on the relationship or the work of women and youth within interreligious dialogue, within interreligious collaboration, and the protection of freedom of religion or belief. And in those three pillars, I will give specific examples of our work at Adyan to maybe highlight the practical side, whether in response to COVID, simply in interreligious dialogue, or also in response to the August 4th explosion that hit Beirut last year. So in terms of inclusion within the community department at Adyan Foundation, we have the Adyan networks, which basically consist of our youth networks, our volunteers network, and our ambassadors network. Those are people who believe in the dignity of being different, and they believe in the mission and vision of Adyan Foundation, and they share it with them. They are change makers or leaders in their local communities. So what they do is we provide them with the necessary capacity building in terms of knowledge of terms, development of skills, in order for them to, share these skills back in their local communities. And this was particularly important during the last year because a lot of those activities were kind of hard to implement, taking into consideration the whole COVID pandemic and the health issue and crisis, and also the economic crisis in Lebanon. So the youth had a really important role in them being influencers in the local community, whether through awareness sessions regarding COVID or not. So it's not particularly regarding COVID, but it's related to the challenges that we faced due to the COVID-19 or the health situation. So during the past year in 2020, 2021, we were able to see how the youth at Adyan felt more empowered. They felt that they had more chances to express themselves or to play a leadership role. And they were pushed by us to be the change maker themselves in their local communities. So this is part through maybe implementing social action projects related to health awareness, related to education or after school tutoring, related maybe to psychosocial support, even to social and economic support. So from this side, the pillar of inclusion was targeted by our youth because everyone was involved regardless of their ethnic background or nationality, because as you know, we have a lot of refugees in Lebanon as well. So this is regarding the pillar of inclusion. Going to the pillar of resilience, which is also extremely important in a period where people are kind of starting to lose hope because, as I said, of the health crisis and the economic situation and the social situation in Lebanon. So what we have at Adyan is another forum which also targets youth, but also religious leaders as well, which is the Forum for Religious Social Responsibility. As a lot of you are aware, we have the concept of CSR, or corporate social responsibility. So what we're trying to do is to shift this concept into religious social responsibility, focusing on a two-pronged approach. One, the importance of religious communities to help everyone in their local communities, regardless of their religious background. So if I'm speaking about, for example, the city of Tripoli, as you know, a lot of cities in Lebanon are mixed Christian Muslims. So it's the idea that religious leaders or sheikhs or priests are responsible for the whole community and not only for their own communities. And the other approach is making international organizations or governments aware that collaboration with religious leaders and religious institutions is important in order to promote inclusive citizenship, interreligious dialogue, and the protection of freedom of religion or belief. And I think this component was particularly worked on after the Beirut explosion on August 4th, where members of the Forum for Religious Social Responsibility, who are basically religious leaders and religious activists, played an important role in implementing tens of response projects to the explosion and to the whole COVID pandemic, because it back then in summer of 2020, both crises overlapped. And the third pillar was the dialogue of diversity, which basically focuses on the idea of daring to talk or daring to know about the different other, or through the education on diversity. When we speak about the education on diversity, is having this idea that students or young people should be aware that they are active citizens in their own communities, and that they should respect the diversity present in their own community through the concept of citizenship. And when I speak particularly about inclusive citizenship, and I think this is related to the part in the Human Fraternity document that says it's about the protection of values and the term of the use and the use of the term minorities. It's actually, when we speak about inclusive citizenship, we're speaking about the recognition of an individual's cultural rights that take on a collective dimension, so that is related to a particular religious group or ethnic group, in addition to his or her individual civil, political, and social rights. So technically, when we speak about inclusive citizenship, we are speaking about a collective or appropriate framework where we can experience the richness of the diversity of ideas, beliefs, and self-expression. So when we also talk about education on diversity, we are talking, one, about positive outlook towards diversity, and two, strengthening initiatives among young people by telling them that you are able to change, that you are change makers in your local communities. So this is why when I talk about interreligious collaboration or belief or inclusion, I talk about those three pillars, which are inclusion, resilience, and diversity. And here I just wanted to say something before I give turn to someone else, is that when we talk about the inclusion of people, we are talking also about, of course, in addition to youth and women, we are talking also about people of non-belief. So Adyan is the word in Arabic for religions. So despite the fact that this is the name of the organization, but we have a lot of members in our networks that are either atheists or agnostics or have different types of beliefs than the belief or religion that you are usually used to. And this is why our focus is mostly on the three values of diversity, solidarity, and human dignity first, rather than on the theological understanding of religion itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna, for sharing also your youth perspective and your really grassroots experiences in Lebanon, but also as the deputy coordinator of the International Youth Committee of Religions for Peace, which obviously is really a global network. So I think that that's really very valuable. And I also very much liked your terminology, or basically the suggestion to no longer speak only about corporate social responsibility, but also about religious social responsibility or faith social responsibility. And I think that's a nice way of also coming to Kishan Manocha. He heads the Tolerance and Non-Discrimination part of the OSCE Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, in which he was also previously the senior advisor on freedom of religion or belief. So there he was kind of the regional counterpart to Special Rapporteur Ahmed Shaheed. And prior to that, he also served as director of the Office of Public Affairs of the Baha'i community of the United Kingdom, which again, obviously shows the religious minority side of it. So over to you, Kishan, for the regional perspective.
Thank you very much, Michael and Ibrahim, and Warsaw in Poland. And first of all, my deep gratitude to the Office of the High Commission for Human Rights, also to our colleagues in the Office of the UN Special Advisor on Prevention of Genocide and the High Representative for the Alliance of Civilizations for organizing this series of webinars, for inviting my participation, and also to commend them and everyone else who put together this excellent global pledge for action by religious actors and faith-based organizations to address the COVID-19 pandemic. And the office that I work for, the OSCE's Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, and I should say this here is the principal institution of the OSCE working in the human dimension of security. So we work to assist and support for free elections, democratic governance, rule of law, human rights and fundamental freedoms in the vast OSCE region. We have been monitoring, if you like, developments pandemic-related developments, and the impact on the human dimension, on democracy, on human rights, on tolerance and non-discrimination. And so, in light of things that we're seeing in the region, negative, of course, in terms of consequences of the pandemic, in terms of their impact on communities, on individuals, and particularly on minorities and religious minorities in this case, but also some of the positive effects that we're also seeing. I wanted to just share a few thoughts in that light. One area that my office takes forward is a key commitment entered into by participating states some years ago, is that of addressing hate crime. Now, of course, we know that, as we have heard, the pandemic has unleashed a tsunami of hate, of intolerance, of discrimination, including in the OSCE region. It is ugly, it is odious, many would say not wholly unexpected, because there is something about the human tendency to seek to blame, to scapegoat for failures which are to be found elsewhere in the response of governments to deal with the pandemic. Sadly, we see blame displaced on groups that are deemed the other, that are deemed the real threat, deemed the origin and source of the virus, and all the woes that have followed as a result. But we find that despite having enacted hate crime laws, many states in the region do not enforce them. And if they do, only lightly and insufficiently. So we have called again on states to enact and enforce hate crime legislation that recognizes specific forms of religious or belief-related bias motivations, and put in place systems and routines and training to ensure that all relevant officials, law enforcement, prosecutors, judiciary, have the capacity to recognize and record them as such. Now, what we have noticed in this particular time is how increasingly nuanced and coded some of the biases are expressed. So one might not recognize certain tropes that are used in speech and expression online and offline. So it is important then that in addressing ourselves, as states address themselves to the issue of bias, that they train officials to appropriately recognize it in all its forms, including in its most subtle forms. And that's a call that we have repeated in recent months. What we've also noticed, and this is a good practice, is that increasingly civil society and the communities themselves are finding ways to facilitate the reporting of hate crimes and hate incidents. And we call on authorities to enhance the support that these civil society groups and the communities themselves, the minorities themselves, have to engage with accessible and confidential mechanisms to report. So we build a more accurate picture, we build awareness in societies, awareness in communities about how to report incidents, how to record incidents, and the nature and prevalence and scope of them. So one of the positive developments we have seen in this time is the more visible and critical role played by civil society organizations, who of course are also working under difficult, challenging circumstances. The space of civil society was shrinking in the OSCE region before the pandemic. It continues to shrink, but nevertheless, there are bold and courageous souls out there who continue to support religious belief minorities in reporting hate incidents. The second point I wanted to reflect on is that, like all of you, we have come to recognize, no doubt, like all of you, that hostility to religious or belief minorities in the pandemic, pre-pandemic, is only a piece in a larger picture of hostility or hate towards any kind of diversity or difference, religious or otherwise. And we've also recognized that we've reached a point where collaboration is essential. It's not just desirable, it's not just a good thing that needs to happen, but actually it is critical and essential because, as I just mentioned, the civic space is being eroded every day, the world over, including in the OSCE region, which, if you like, boasts some of the most advanced democracies in the world. And in order to uphold and strengthen the civic space, communities, groups, and organizations must find ways and must be supported to find ways to work together across the civic space. So in this context, ODIHR has been exploring how the security of religious or belief minorities can be addressed and potentially enhanced through collaborative networks, coalitions involving those minorities, religious belief minorities, and other marginalized and discriminated groups in society that are working on efforts to foster mutual respect, understanding, promote solidarity and constructive dialogue and action. And we find that such coalitions are strongest when the approaches they take are accessible to all segments of civil society, are inclusive of all those who wish to engage in them. Moreover, the groups, we find that the coalitions are effective and strong, particularly when they are committed unequivocally to the full set of human dimension commitments, the rights and freedoms enshrined in international human rights law and OSCE participating state commitments. Because the risk is that if they do not explicitly address themselves to uphold those commitments, to observe those rights and freedoms, the coalitions themselves, in the midst of rising intolerance, might unwittingly reinforce stereotypes and forms of intolerance within their own sphere, which would be deeply unfortunate. So in our work, we support different forms of coalitions, some that address all strands of intolerance, some that address few, depending on local context and domestic situation. And we found in various parts of the region how essential, how valuable it is to have the support of majority religious communities in joining efforts to promote and protect religious or belief minorities. If we are to challenge advocates of religious or belief hatred who claim to speak in the name of the so-called silent majority, then it's important that the majority and its representatives do not remain silent. In the country in which I live, Poland, we have seen in a couple of cities something in recent months that, or particularly in the recent months, that we have not seen so explicitly expressed before. The support given to particularly Muslim minority, the Muslim minority in a few cities, as I said, to find spaces within churches to pray when their community centers were vandalized with what I would call COVID-19 related hate expressions, hate speech. So this is a positive story that is emerging from sadly a climate of intolerance, not just in Poland, but as I said, in the vast OSCE region. And the final point I want to make is this, and it's something that we noted as we put together a report last year looking at the impact of COVID-19 on participating state commitments to the human dimension. It is not something unique to this region. It is not something that you will be hearing for the first time. And that is, despite the most straitened of circumstances, religious or belief minorities can and do retain a sense of very powerful agency. That heightened vulnerability does not necessarily mean lack of agency. And we've seen that during the pandemic. We've heard examples of it today. We've seen it in pre-pandemic times. And I think in particular case of the heavily persecuted minorities in various parts of the world, such as, of course, the Baha'is in Iran, who have deliberately, consciously eschewed the victim status, the status of victimhood, demonstrating a remarkable degree of resilience, constructive resilience, in the midst of heavy persecution, and working together with other groups, including with the majorities, in order to contribute to the advancement of society. So we've seen in the OSCE region, in that spirit, in that same way of responding creatively, adaptively, resourcefully, under difficult circumstances. One, not just restrictions on freedom of religion or belief in all parts of the OSCE region, but two, the added layer of religion and belief-related intolerance and discrimination, hatred and bigotry. We've seen minority groups reach out to other minority groups. We've seen religious minorities and belief minorities reach out to the majorities, working hand in hand, adapting to new forms of interaction suited to the public health requirements, but finding ways to be of deliberate service to society. So when we came to compile this report, we thought it would be only a tale of woe and despair and problems, but we were struck particularly by the positive examples. So we included a section devoted to that, that in these diverse settings, religious belief minorities strengthen societal resilience, offer hope to the entire society, not to their co-religionists and co-believers, and in so doing, send out a very powerful example of the constructive and transformative role that religion and belief can play in our challenging times and indeed in all times. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kishan, both for the bad news and the good news that will frame well our general discussion. The bad news being that bias is in human nature and it will continue as long as we are humans. But secondly, that monitoring, reporting, denouncing, and alerting people is a very lively way counter this human nature. Of course, the human rights mechanism, special rapporteurs and treaty bodies are the main axes around which the civil society, different coalitions and actors can rely on. But also the mechanisms are living difficult times because of the pandemic, and that's why the role of civil society is increasingly important.
And with this, I would give the floor to the Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion or Belief, Ahmed Shaheed, who I don't think needs any further introduction from his biography.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, friends, colleagues. It's really good to listen to your, very wise, thoughtful words and insightful statements earlier. I have learned a lot from that. Well, the pandemic has really, in many cases, brought the worst out in humanity. But as Speaker said at the beginning, it also has brought out the best in many. And I think it's really important at a time when there is clearly evidence of worsening, our respect for religious freedom, that we also document the good news stories and we sit together, learn from each other about how we can support each other, of course, but also how others are doing things that we could benefit from. And I always come to this notion of constructive resilience. Of course, it goes to the Baha'i context, but there's such an important lesson in that for all of us in terms of how we can respond to persecution in a very positive, constructive fashion that is all-embracing and that is not steeped in victimology, as it were, but is positive and can embrace others. And there are, of course, snippets of similar things elsewhere where we can learn from. We heard many from others during the day, how Rabbi Polakoff from I suppose Argentina spoke about the commitment of all solidarity amongst groups to stand up for a group that was targeted. And there are many stories like this that are so heartwarming and gives us optimism that we could work this through. Now, the notion of citizenship always comes to me with a red light flashing on it. I mean, I know it's been presented in a good way. The idea is to argue that the state has an obligation to protect everybody equally. It certainly made a lot of sense in the 1860s, but I think today we should be informed by the notions of intersectionality that has become. I think the pandemic has shown just how important that notion of intersectionality is, because we replicate overlapping systems, systems of vulnerability and oppression. If we ignored those fine nuances about subgroup situations, So we should talk about inclusive citizenship, but also recognizing that in that discourse, people, we lose out. And I think one of the key things in fighting for Article 18 that Professor Charles Malik got for us as early as 1947 June was say we're not talking about the individual, we're talking about the human person. That this framework is about the human person, not even about the individual. Human person, because human beings have been endowed with reason and conscience. So we begin from that perspective. So I think we need to be very broad about how we speak about this. In my work, I was being, I think, almost fixated on this idea of intersectionality, because we tend to drop a lot of voices we don't hear. And it's up to us to, I think, reach out to these groups to ensure they have a voice as all of us in voicing their concerns, in shaping their destiny, in shaping the framework we're working on, and also shaping the initiatives that we develop. So that is something I really want to focus on. And as Reverend Bonnie Evans mentioned, we had very careful about how Article 18 can be instrumentalized by groups. And of course, the Minorities framework is very clear from the UDHR last two articles. Article 5 of ICPR make it clear that we cannot invoke a particular right to the detriment of other rights or to a level that is protected more than the right itself. So we've seen in some cases Article 18 used in ways that may be detrimental to other people. So it's important to recognize that we're talking about a human right to be seen in the context of all other rights, and therefore in a holistic sense, as my predecessor Heiner Bellefolt says so eloquently. And so from my standpoint, I've had two almost obsessions. One is intersectionality. The other is hate speech. Hate speech, because when I came into the mandate, it was already on the upsurge. And I've done reports on anti-Semitism, recently on anti-Muslim hatred, and of course, other reports on gender aspects as well, all to do with how hatred has been so widely disseminated to levels where, it becomes outright violence. And I did the report on anti-Semitism because of the level of violence against Jewish groups that I had seen when I was, doing my reports. And then I've also argued that humanists, for example, face very violent outcomes in many societies, not just by the state actors, but not even by non-state actors, but the family as well. So there are a variety of ways of how intersectionality and hatred again overlap, and we need to be mindful for addressing this. But the key thing I want to leave behind is that how important it would be for Ibrahim and Michael to look at how we can create some artifacts from these Global Pledge meetings that would be there permanently for others to look at as useful insights for all of us to follow. I mean, I've learned a lot from today's sitting alone, and if we could document some of these efforts people have made, the insights they have produced, this can be a real, I think, tool to empower others in how to respond to emergency situations as they go along. A final word, of course, to Nassim Malik, who made a reference to me. Yes, I think you make a very important point. The violations are not only in countries where there are serious rule of law deficits, as the case of, say, Pakistan and for maybe in Indonesia for Ahmadis, but also in countries which are called mature democracies, where the level of tolerance for others is, as we all know, going down, and are prepared to expose people to real harm when they fully well know what they are doing. So I think we have to call out these contexts where I think mature democracies are also taking the soft option of appeasing far-right groups in their midst and exposing vulnerable communities to harm. So as a rapporteur, I have to call out these concerns as well. But thank you, Nassim, for raising that issue up. And thank you all for such a wonderful sets of interventions. And finally, to my colleague, Issa Minorities, it's been a pleasure working with you. And as you said, those communications that we had to issue this year, a lot on hate speech, of course, highlight the concerns we have with it, but also some of them may have made a difference in terms of how states may have, at least initially, taken a step back. So working with you, we are able to issue these communications to states, and we'll continue to do so through collaboration with you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. Thank you very much, Ahmed, for your thoughtful advice, and rest assured that your obsession of intersectionality is very duly shared by everybody, because This is the real price of genuine indivisibility of rights. And all the perspectives or all the entry points that has been exchanged today and in the preceding workshops are different lights from different angles that just need to link the dots. This will be our priority, and with your help, and Fernand and all the authors of the Faithful Rights Framework will come back to you with something as a harvest and solicit your advice on how to best make it accessible and usable for all communities of practice who are our hope with the human rights mechanisms. But you can stop the human rights mechanism by finance, or at least weaken them. You cannot stop the voice of the civil society. And on that encouraging note, from the bad news, I want us now to end in beauty and go back to a recitation or a trajectory of the Faithful Rights Framework in beauty and in music. But before that, we will ask two of our partners who have been part and parcel of that story, of which we commemorate the 4th anniversary exactly yesterday, Diane, Alai, and Iqtidar. Diane as a representative of the Baha'i international community to the UN in Geneva, and Iqtidar, who is director of the Institute of Leadership and Community Development. What they have in common is that they were both in Beirut, among many of us, and both pleaded for an arbitration on whether or not to use religious quotes in a UN document. So my question to them, and then we will hear the answer in music, is what do you make out of the use of religious text in such a document? And how do you see the future of this practice? So the film you are going to see after their 2 minutes each is a film to which they participated, not as a filmmakers, because the filmmaker is Michael Wiener, whom I thank him very much for an inspiring film. But let's first hear 2 minutes Diane, then 2 minutes Iqtidar, then the film, and we will leave each other in beauty and in thoughtfulness. So, Diane.
Thank you very much, Ibrahim, and thank you for allowing me to participate in this really exciting Faithful Right. I think I'm still, every time I'm excited about it when I talk, because I think that what is important that it reaches to the core of the belief of every person that believes in something. And I think that this transcends a lot of issues and helps to be much more inclusive, because it brings within the human rights fold a lot of people that would not necessarily be drawn to it, by letting them relate to their own scriptures and their own religious scriptures, and how that also promotes human rights. And so I think that this is wonderful. I think that it should continue as such. I was very happy to be able to participate both in the meeting, both in giving quotes from the Baha'i writings, and both in actually participating also in the film by the great filmmaker Michael Wiener, but and musician, and not only a filmmaker. But I wanted to say something along the lines of inclusivity that we have mentioned, is that really it is important to have quotes from very diverse religious backgrounds and also humanists for each of the sections. So to increase the number of quotes, because that will not only appeal to the heart of the individual that it resonates for, but it will also show this inclusivity that we've talked about for the past almost 2 hours, that there is recognition on the part also of the majority religions that these writings, these quotes from other people's beliefs have also a value which is either moral, ethical, or spiritual. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Diane. Iqtidar.
Thank you very much, Ibrahim. I wanted to say the things which Diane has already elaborated. As we all know that in the world we live, religion is a part of peacemaking as well as of conflict. And one of the major problems we face in the world today is that the religions being misinterpreted, their core theology being misrepresented and misinterpreted. Hence the reason why we advocated the case that we need to have these quotes from the core religious text of various faiths. So the people of that very faith should know what their faiths stand for. Interesting enough for me, I remember when the first draft was ready, there was a representation of various faiths in it, but not of the Sikhism, for instance. I'm a practicing Muslim, but I thought I need to stand for another faith. That's what my faith has taught me, that I need to be inclusive of all. That was a spirit, that all the faiths stand for others. So I suggested that 4 stanzas from Guru Granth Sahib, the course 6 scripture, should be adopted in Faith for Right declaration. And I remember it was adopted at 2 o'clock in the morning when that was my last email to Michael, and then it was adopted. Now, I just want to talk quickly about the impact. Once we have gone through this process, and very kindly we added those 3 hymns from Guru Granth Sahib, I thought it was very inclusive because Guru Granth Sahib's 6th scripture is inclusive in the sense that it has the stanzas not only from the Sikh masters, but from the Muslims, from Hindus, and various followers of other religion. I took it back to the communities after the Faith for Right declaration was adopted, because the whole point is that these documents shouldn't just stay in the UN structure, it should go to the communities. And it was very well received, Ibrahim. When we send it to the communities, I must report that in US, Canada, India, Pakistan, various places, people really like this idea. And you know, some of the minority communities like the Sikhs, who have no representation in the UN structure, formal representation in the UN structure, they really feel very, very happy. And they feel that UN is relevant to them as well because their scripture has been adopted. So it was very much welcomed by the larger Sikh community. They had various seminars where they propagated about it. Then they made some short videos about the importance of faithful rights as well as these 3 Sikh scripture. Now the impact is very, very recent in the COVID crisis. Like in our Faith for Right declaration, we have a quote from Guru Granth Sahib about Brahm Gyani Sada Nirdokh, which means who is the great man? Great man is the one who works or serves everyone. So following that, the Sikh community in New York and elsewhere in the Gurdwaras, their temples, they served free meals to the poor and the needy and the people who were most in need in the meals across the world, and that was acknowledged worldwide. And likewise, one of the quote from Guru Granth Sahib, which we are gonna play today in the video as well, about the woman rights and who the woman is. And this quote was very, very historic because it was given by Guru Nanak, the founder of the Sikh faith. In the context, he was born in India where women were classified as less human in his contemporary world. So the impact of that was that in 2019, when the minority ethnic Muslim community was being marginalized and some statement came from some vigilante Hindu groups of RSS that the Muslim woman should be raped in India, it was the Sikhs who went to these different parts and they rescued the Muslim woman and took them to their indigenous community in Kashmir. So the impact is really huge. And the message we get from it that we need to take these quotes, these hymns, these quote texts back to their community. So the communities take the ownership and they feel alleviated and motivated that their faith stand for certain principles, and that's what needs to be reminded to those very communities. And we need to stand for each other on every platform. Thank you.
It's so reassuring to hear that, especially after the hesitations and the pushback against this idea 4 years ago. I'm glad to hear both you and Diane hitting at the heart of the rationale and assuring us for the future. Iqtidar, just for the sake of a historical note, you have been the first immediate implementation by what you quoted now, using the quotes from our religion, in implementing Commitment 1, which is to stand up together to defend others, not our own communities. Just for the sake of historical record, I think it's an honor for you that I thank you for. Now, the second honor I want to give is for the chief filmmaker and chief musician, just to present us the film. So I will leave the final words with great gratitude for Michael Wiener. Michael.
Many thanks to all of the participants and really also for the inspirational explanations, both from Diane and Dr. Iqtidar. And really, I think it encapsulates the idea of really standing up, not only for your own community, but also for the others. And you will hear basically know also, several of those. And I want to specifically also acknowledge the wonderful voice of the soprano Aisha Redwan, who's also listening in the webinar, and her husband, Habib Yamin, who wrote the very inspirational poem in Arabic, inspired by the gender equality commitment. So this is kind of a way to sum up and to have it in an artistic manner. So you can see this as the outroduction, like a film that is basically now ending the wonderful discussion, the peer-to-peer learning that we had over the last 1.5 hours. So I will now share, I hope that it now works without a problem, also the film, and then we hope to see you again.
We commit to ensure non-discrimination and gender equality, particularly regarding harmful stereotypes and practices or gender-based violence. We pledge to ensure non-discrimination and gender equality in implementing this declaration on Faith for Rights. We specifically commit to revisit each within our respective areas of competence those religious understandings and interpretations that appear to perpetuate gender inequality, harmful stereotypes, or even condone gender-based violence. Justice and equal worth of everyone, as well as to affirm the right of all women, girls, and boys not to be subjected to any form of discrimination and violence. This is our pledge. This is our commitment.
Pour être efficace, toute approche globale de renforcement des capacités devrait cibler les dirigeants influents. Notamment les chefs traditionnels et religieux.
Guru Granth Sahib Ji, Pand Jammiye, Pand Nimmiye, Pand Mangan Vyaho, पंडो होवे दोस्ती पंडो चले राहो पंड मुआ पंड पालिए पंड होवे बंधान सो क्यों मंदा आखिए चित जमे राजान पंडो ही पंड उपजे पंडे बाज न कोए नानक पंडे बाहरा इको साचा सोए
The world of humanity is possessed of two wings, the male and the female. So long as these two wings are not equivalent in strength, the bird will not fly. Until womankind reaches the same degree as man, until she enjoys the same arena of activity, extraordinary attainment for humanity will not be realized. Abdul Baha.
חסד ואמת נפגשו, צדק ושלום נשקו. מדד, 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 This is our pledge. This is our commitment.